Okay, so that brings up 9C, presentation on Red Wing West Public Safety Station Design and Strategic Plan. And that would be Shannon.
Well, thank you, Mayor, Council President, and Council. When I was hired, one of the things that the Council did ask was that I review the station plans, the reports that, the numerous reports that have been compiled on this station, and come back with a thorough plan and recommendations, which that is tonight. Hopefully it's not too long, but we do have a lot of information to talk about. As I go through this presentation, if you have questions, just grab my attention and we'll address them there. We'll also have a kind of a review at the end. You're aware of the history of the Burnside area and also this station that is being discussed. I've reviewed these reports, the 2008 report and the 2009 report that was commissioned by the Council, and I completely agree with both of them. They both outline our response times. They also reflect the negative impact on our ISO rating in that area, which we'll talk about both of those. And also, it discusses the percentage of calls that this station would respond to, which today, we're going to say this a couple of times, is 31%. And so that area represents 31% of our call. And also in 18, we have the $4.5 million that is budgeted in the CIP for this building. So one question that I've been asked from people in the community and also from the Council is, why not one station in the center of town? And that's a really great question, because over time, fires have been changing. We're having less fires, but then again, more firemen and more individuals are dying in fires. And so Underwriter Laboratories did this study of what is a legacy fire compared to a modern day fire. Legacy fire is a fire 30 years ago. They constructed both of these rooms using construction material and furnishings from that time period. Both fires were started at the exact same time. And what we see is the modern fire does take longer to start, but once it does start, it burns in a very rapid way, to a point where 30 years ago, the fire education material said we had 12 minutes to escape our home. And that is true, and you could see that here in this video, that we did have more time. Now they're saying we have 3 minutes to escape a burning home. Because at 3 minutes and 40 seconds, we reach what's called a flashover. Flashover is when everything in that room reaches a common ignition temperature and bursts into flames. It takes almost 20 minutes for that legacy fire to reach that same temperature, that same BTU output. And the reason is because we have changed the contents of our room so much. Before, we had natural fibers, cotton, regular Class A, what we refer to material. Now we have plastics and polymers and all kinds of things that are putting off the toxic carcinogens and so forth. So here we see the ending of this video. And so that is the reason, that is the reason that we can't have one station in the middle, is our response times. The fires, yes, we have less fires, but they are dramatically different than what they were 20 or 30 years ago. The next thing is medicals. Using Google Earth, the pink shaded area there represents 10 minutes from the fire station here downtown. Okay, so outside of that is beyond 10 minutes. That is very near to where, actually let me see if I can, Station 2 would be located right in this area here. If I could hold that laser still, right in that area there. So 10 minutes. These are medical calls, just some of the medical calls that are dramatically impacted by an increase in time. Our firefighters and paramedics are literally saving lives every day. They do a great job. Their training and the equipment that we're carrying on our ambulances are state of the art. It's the time that's impacting the calls. Not more equipment or anything like that. It's the time limit. Because at 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and beyond is what represents outside of that area. Cardiac arrest, stroke, seizures, diabetic calls. These are calls that, well, especially like diabetic, it can go from something as something we can treat on scene, the patient stays at home, versus 15 minutes or so where we need to be taking the patient to the hospital. And so these are big impacts. The next thing that's outlined in the reports, and I completely agree with, is our insurance ratings. Insurance companies utilize a company, one of many, called ISO. ISO looks at a community and gives it a risk classification. These classifications are from a 1 to a 10, 1 being good and 10 representing an area with very limited fire protection. Red Wing is classified as a 4/8. What that means is that within 5 miles of the fire station, and if you are within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant, you are a class 4. The 5 road miles is represented by the green shaded area from the current station. An 8 would be that you are within the 5 miles, but there is no fire hydrant immediately in your area. And again, outside of the 5 miles and also outside of our fire protection district, our boundary, would be a class 10. Putting the new fire station in its spot there is represented by the blue shaded area. There are homes in that area that will go from a 10 to a 4 because there are fire hydrants there immediately after the station is opened. Okay, and now the difference between the 10 and the 4 is an average of 30% savings. Every insurance company is different. I've contacted all the insurance companies and also the big 3 asking for numbers for this presentation. They're all very different. And so we're using an average of 30% savings. That's quite a bit for these homeowners that are paying taxes and live in Red Wing, but yet are not fully protected, I'd say, for the insurance purposes. Also, this shaded
Shannon?
blue, oh, go ahead.
Shannon, can I ask a question?
Yes.
It's maybe a public works question, but
Yes.
what determines the placement of fire hydrants? Where we have them
Well,
and where we don't?
I'll let them answer, but I think that really the main thing is the water mains and the water service that is there, the infrastructure that is in place. Can it support a fire hydrant? And as a community grows, and again, I'll let you answer there, Rick, but as a community grows, if the water service can support a fire hydrant, I do believe they go in.
Yes.
Rock. That's a lot of it is rock, pure rock, trying to dig through pure rock and hills.
Our water does not lead or go throughout the whole city limits as a whole, all the way out to the city limits.
It stops at Highway 19. Anybody that's past Highway 19, even out to Mill Road, doesn't have fire hydrants. So it's a lot of area. And going out the other way, I don't think like Ide Lane and them, they don't have none of that. Nobody out there's got fire hydrants either, and that's down that way.
Even the homes that are not protected by the fire hydrant, which would put them to the 4, they would go from a 10 to an 8, and there's still a savings there. And those savings that I'm referring to is residential numbers. I could not get commercial numbers from the insurance companies, but we know that there is a savings there also. This blue area also represents 31% of our calls. In 2015, this fire station would have responded to over 1,000 calls, 1,055 to be exact. And so that's quite an impact when we talked about the 10-minute response time for medicals, when we talked about the dramatic change in fire behavior. I believe that is a number that stands out in the reports and in also this report. Any other questions on that before we move on? Okay, this is a rendering of the fire station. I do have representatives from 5 Bugles here to answer any questions you may have also. The fire station is a single-story building, and it meets all of the community's needs. When we looked at this, we looked at all of the multi-purposes that have been put on it, and I completely agree with that every public building needs to be able to function in many different things, and we're going to talk about those. First, it fits into the community. It is aesthetically pleasing building that will fit into that community there, and also it is the 50-year building that the council discussed with previous drawings. It meets the community needs, it meets the needs of the fire department today and also going forward. When I looked at this, I looked at every square footage and evaluated our needs currently, but 30 years down the road. We're not going to have to put an addition on this building. It's going to meet our needs. As the community changes, we'll be able to meet those changes. It also meets the needs of the police department as a satellite office, which has been discussed, and we're going to talk about again here in the next slide. But it meets those needs also for the police department. So here is the schematics of the fire station. The first area is the public space. That was an important key part of the council in the previous designs, that we have an area for the public to utilize. We have increased the size of the training room, which is a meeting room, which is a voting space, an area that people can utilize within the community to hold their events that would be appropriate for that space. We have the lobby, and we have 2 restrooms. This space, while adjoined to the fire station, is also secure from the station. And so it meets that need very easily for the community to come in without disrupting functions at the fire station or anything like that, or our activities disrupting them. The next area is the dorm rooms or the bunk rooms. We have 6 rooms here. We identified that as the maximum number of personnel that would be overnight at this station. That doesn't mean that there's 6 career firefighters. This means that we could have a combination of career and paid on call overnight, a combination of career and students and interns, which we do have. This is the maximum number that would respond out of the station. And so that's what this station is built for and nothing more. The next thing is we have 3 bathrooms for staff and also for police officers that are utilizing the station. These are separate from the 2 public bathrooms that we talked about in the beginning. The living quarters for the staff, we have the kitchen and a day room, which are up in this area here. These are built for 6 people. We're not overbuilding this. Again, we looked at every square foot and justified it for now and 30 years down the road. We also have an exercise room here for the staff. And then we have this office space, which is a shared office space. In working with the police chief, him and I discussed what his needs were for his officers and compared with the needs that I will have for the firefighters there. And we're able to do that in the same space. And so we have an office. We've talked about his the needs for his security concerns for the computers and things. And we're going to be able to meet all of that right here. The police department will be able to speak to witnesses in that space. Whatever they need to do, it will meet their needs along with ours. The apparatus bay has not changed from the previous drawings. We still have 3 bays. It is the exact same as we had before. The apparatus that are going out there are the same that was identified previously. We're not purchasing any apparatus. We don't need to purchase any apparatus. This is actually going to house vehicles that are now parked outside. I have 2 vehicles that are parked outside that I'm going to need to budget to replace hose on them because the UV rays have destroyed the hose on those fire trucks. And so we're now going to be able to put things inside because we just don't have room now, is the reason for that.
Shannon, I have one
Yes.
question for you. It's still showing a stairway in here. Is that needed?
Yes. The stairway here, what we have is utilities. There's a mezzanine right up here. And so this is the stairwell up to that mezzanine. That's where the furnace and water heater,
Gotcha.
things like that.
Okay.
Shannon,
Yes.
the command vehicle, that belongs to the police department, is that going in there?
It's the same as what was before. I know that there's been questions about, we have a lot of vehicles that need to come in there. And at $253 a square foot, we have to look at exactly what is going in there. One thing we did do, and we'll see it here in a second, is we put the station in a location on the land that the city owns, that there is room for a garage or other buildings on these lots that may not cost $253 a square foot. But back to your original question, ma'am, this hasn't changed, so whatever was identified to go there before is going to go there now.
Yeah, and that was identified before.
Okay, then that's in that list. Yep.
It's just, you realize that if you had an emergency and needed the command vehicle right now, it's not all that accessible. So.
Oh, I totally agree. Just like our boat. We shrink wrapped the boat and it's gone into storage. We now don't have that.
And we have open water.
Yes, and we have open water. Exactly. We have a fire prevention trailer that we actually don't have control of where it's parked now. We have another engine. So it's the same thing. We have assets, just like the police department does, that we need to secure, but also be able to use. Yes. That was a great question. Anything else?
Anybody else? Okay.
And so here's the station. Like I said, it hasn't really changed from the original plot map of where we were putting it. We're trying to utilize the space of these lots as much as we can. And so for future use, we've identified this back area where we can put a garage. I'm not saying that that's what we have to do, but we can down the road. Cost. Like I said, we've looked at every square foot and we've asked, how do we need, or do we need this space now, and how are we going to need it in 30 years? What exactly are we going to need? By removing the second floor, this cut the size by 1,200 square feet. We identified that we didn't need that second floor. By removing that, we were able to remove an elevator, the pole, another stairwell, things that were very costly, and we were able to bring that size down. And so the building costs, also it saved over $700,000 in building costs and furnishings, that elevator, the stairwell, things like that. The building costs now, you see there, 3.5, and then the furnishings of 150 brings us to 3.655 on the building itself. This is also from what I understand, the landscaping and really everything that should be associated with it. I was asked by a council member about the utilities and the ongoing costs of the building. And so what I did was I looked at our utilities for our current fire station. I figured those out per square footage and then just did the math to calculate it for this new building. And so being a new building, I wouldn't think that the utilities would be the same exactly. But so this number is 17,000 is probably a little high, but that is what we know for an ongoing utility costs. Any questions on the building portion? We have these three sections we're going to talk about. Calls for service. We had 3,402 calls in 2015. When I was preparing this report, at that time we had 2,820, which was a 13% increase for the same time period last year. I spoke with finance director, and he actually also agreed with this by looking at our ambulance billing. It shows the same uptake in percentage. There's a lot of reasons for that. The changing demographics, I'd say, of the community is going to increase these calls. Two important things here. 700 times we had 2 emergencies going at the exact same time. And then 71 times we had 3 emergencies going at the exact same time. Which, with our current staffing, leads to quite a bit of overtime, and also the we lose the ability to take every single call, and I'm going to talk about that here and what that means. Well, first, right now our current staffing is 7 per shift. It's an odd number, and it kind of throws a curve in there for us. Because at our minimum staffing of 5, you see there how we can staff. We have 3 on an engine and we have 2 on an ambulance. Well, every single time that this ambulance goes out of town, which is hundreds of times, if not thousands, we're calling in overtime. Okay? Even if 2 of these individuals were able to get on another ambulance and handle another emergency, which they will, if an emergency came in before overtime came in, we're left with 1 person at the station. That 1 person cannot take another call. Even at full staffing, we have the 3 on the engine and the 2 on each ambulances, so we are staffing 2 ambulances. Every time these ambulances go out, again, on these transfers, we're calling in overtime so we can keep our minimum manning in place. Keep using the wrong remote. What I'm recommending is the same thing that was recommended to you by previous administration, is that we go to 8. I want to make sure that I fully explain this, and if you have any questions, please ask. Moving to a staffing of 8 will move our minimum staffing to 6. And so that means that at no time will we go below 6 people per shift. We may have 7 on shift, but we'll never go below the 6. With our minimum staffing, we're going to have 2 on an engine and 2 on 2 ambulances. And so if we have both stations, there's the staffing of the stations. We would have an engine and an ambulance at Station 1 and an ambulance at Station 2. Again, that area represented over 30% of our call volume. And so now we're able to get to that emergency scene a lot quicker. If we're at full staff, we're going to have an engine and an ambulance staffed at each station. And so I think you would agree with me that going to this even number, we're able to staff our trucks a little better. Yes?
Shannon, if we have 1 ambulance at the minimum staffing go out of town,
Yes.
Are you pulling everyone back downtown? You've mentioned that before, that we would not have staffing out at Burnside at that time.
I'm sorry.
If we're at minimum staffing,
Okay.
6, ambulance goes out of town, you'll pull all 4 to downtown?
No, most likely not. Most likely at that point we'd go to a dynamic response, where that's one part with the CAD system and dispatch that we're looking at, to where it knows where we're at and it's responding appropriately, so we wouldn't have to pull them from that station to cover downtown. Now, if there was another call in the downtown area, then of course they would respond from the Burnside station.
Okay.
Yes?
When you talk about staffing and full staffing, that's not counting your training officer, your fire marshal. So if you're in a situation where you're really short, you can't get people in, is Andy, for instance, going out on an ambulance?
Oh, most definitely. Yes, our 40-hour staff is definitely utilized. What I don't do is plan on using them. Our fire marshal's out doing inspections. Our training captain is out doing training and going to seminars, things like that. And so we don't want to stop them from doing their job. But you're 100% correct that in the emergency, they are expected to still perform, and they keep up their training as paramedics and firefighters. So yes,
Thank you.
we do.
Okay.
So the increased cost for these 3 firefighters. The cost of a firefighter is $89,000. That is the salary and also benefits. 52%, though, of our salaries are covered by the ambulance enterprise fund. And if you have more questions on that, I'm sure the finance director could answer that. But there's the breakdown of the numbers. And so the cost of adding 3 firefighters is $267,000 a year. $139,000 is covered by the enterprise fund. $128,000 is covered by the general fund. The upside of the of this staffing is that we're going to have the increased call volume. And what I mean by that is there are times where we're not able to handle non-emergency mutual aid calls. If a neighboring community calls us for an ambulance to do a transfer from their hospital to another facility, which does happen quite a bit, and we're at minimum staffing, we cannot handle it. Okay? And so that's lost revenue also. Overtime impact, President Hove asked me to look at this. It's an almost impossible number for me to get for the whole last year. So what I did do is I looked at 2 weeks, a standard 2 weeks. There was nothing out of the ordinary for response-wise, and there were 4 times that overtime was called during that period that we would not have called. And so we know there is an impact with the increased call volume, and we also know that there is a positive impact of their overtime. It's difficult for me to give an exact number outside of those 2 weeks, but we know that that positive impact is there. Any questions on the increased cost for the firefighters? You know, it's for justification purposes, yes, obviously if we build this next station, we need these 3 extra people. But also, I think I've outlined, just in our current response model, how these 3 individuals are needed now. If we were to agree with moving forward with the station, we would need at least 6 months prior to putting these individuals on their own for their training and so forth. So I would think that mid-17 is when they would need to come on board so that they were ready to go. Training. Again, as I said before, our firefighters and paramedics are doing an excellent job. We are training where we can, when we can. NFPA and also ISO have a lot of requirements, hundreds of hours annually for different disciplines that we must train on. ISO requires that each firefighter train 24 hours each month, and that we have that documented. I will say that we are not meeting these requirements, and we have not met those for quite a while, and it boils down to not having a place to do these things at, to train at. We make do with what we can. We go to Rochester and we do our live burns once a year, which means we're not getting the other 2 that are a requirement from ISO, but we're doing it at least once. That burn costs us $8,000 each year to do that. We cannot train if we can't put up ladders against buildings because we might damage windows or break windows. We can't pull hose lines through a facility practicing because of possible water damage. So we keep the hose lines dry. There's a big difference between a dry hose line and a wet one. And so our firefighters are not fully, completely training, but we're doing the best we can. Our firefighters have a new commitment to training. We are increasing our weekly training. We are going to meet and exceed the 20 hours a month per firefighter that is required. We are training in all of our disciplines, and what I mean by that is currently we have 9 disciplines that our firefighters are expected to perform in, like rope rescue, confined space, EMS, firefighting, and so on. There are 9 of those. We're going to excel at each one of those. We're going to be able to perform each of those as the professionals that we are. We are combining our training with our paid-on-call staff. We're utilizing our paid-on-call staff just as much as our career staff. We're training side by side. But to do these things, we need a place to train. I've said it to a couple of you, and I believe I said it at the last meeting that we were discussing this, that this training facility is just as important as the building or our firefighters, our extra 3 firefighters that we need. It's just as important because our firefighters need to train. In our line of work, we cannot just be okay. We must excel at our job. And to do that, we need a place to train. I am recommending that we construct on the second lot that the city does own, next to the fire station, a public safety training campus. It could be whatever title. That's just what title I thought of at the moment. But a training area for the fire department to train where we could flow water. We could train pumping and discharge water out of the fire trucks without worrying about damaging the landscaping of the neighbors. or something like that. The police department can utilize this area for drivers training just as we could, for tactical situations. It's endless because it gives us this space that's dedicated to us for training, like vehicle extrication. Right now we utilize a small space wherever we can. It might be a parking lot, maybe down at Public Works, but I can't leave that car there. You know, we have to do our thing and then pick it up. And we're grateful for the area, but we just can't leave it there for months. I'd like to leave it in a space for months and train on it until there's nothing left of it. Really. Let's utilize it as much as we can, but we can't because we don't have this space. Here's the building I'm recommending that we construct, a 4-story, all-steel constructed building. As you can see, it has a pitched roof and also a flat roof, where we could do ladder operations. We could cut holes in this roof. We have a balcony simulator or simulation where we could practice rescues from different heights. All of these windows open and close, and it's all steel. We could flow water in here all day long and not worry about it. The police department can utilize their paintball guns and their sim rounds and not worry about damaging the nice interior of some building. We're going to be able to do interior operations with our hose loads. This building also has 2 burn rooms. And so we're not going to burn just once a year. We're going to be able to go down and burn every time we have new people coming on board, every time a captain on shift thinks the crew needs to go down and train, multiple times. We're going to be able to go down and burn in this Class A burn room. The police department, like I mentioned, will be able to utilize this facility. This is a class that I taught in South Dakota for a SWAT team in rappelling. We're going to be able to do the same thing here. They're going to be able to practice rappelling, making entries, breaching the doors, again, without the worry of damaging the nice interior. We're going to be able to train the way we do it, the way we are supposed to do our job. We're going to be able to put up windows. I'm reminded of the first training exercise that we had while we were here. We accidentally broke a window with putting up ladders. Pure accident. But here we're going to be able to put up ladders like we're supposed to and not worry about those accidents. So here's the cost of this building. The cost of the building is $450,000, and the cost of the building itself, the shipment of it, this is I guess you could call it a prefab building, and then the construction of it on site. The groundwork and concrete work is $89,000 for a total for this public safety training area of $539,000. We're not developing that whole site. There's no reason to. We're putting this in a corner of it so that there is still room, like you had mentioned, for other areas, other spaces, other buildings down the road that we could still put out there at this campus. Concrete work only goes out 15 feet around the building, and the rest is crushed gravel, because that's all we need. Any questions on the training element? Yes?
Yeah, Chief, is there ongoing maintenance costs? I mean, if you break a window, you need to replace it, so you put a hole through the roof, you're going to replace the roof?
As long as they put the hole where it's supposed to go, there's no repair costs, let's say. The ongoing costs, the only ongoing cost to it is in the burn room. Every 10 years, the panels need to be inspected, the heat thermal panels, and so there may be 1 or 2 of those that are cracked. Not a lot of money, but that would be the only maintenance cost, because all the rest of it, interior-wise, is just the open steel.
The burn room, yeah, it can accommodate different types of fuel sources as well, I assume?
No, only Class A.
Okay.
Now, down the road, we could upgrade if we wanted to for natural gas fires. There is a big cost in that. But no, we would only allow Class A material. This is pallets and hay, paper, things like that. There's also a ventilation system that keeps the temperature from going too high. And so it would kick in, I believe it's 800 degrees, which is beneficial to save those tiles and also our equipment and gear.
Other questions? Okay.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot tonight, and it went a little quicker than I thought it was going to, which I'm glad. But we covered 3 really important topics. First, the fire station construction, this multi-use building. The construction and furnishings is just a little bit over $3.6 million. The public safety training campus, which is this joint, much-needed training area, of $535,000. So we're able to construct this public safety campus that's going to benefit the police department, the fire department for many years to come. It's going to increase our staffing, as I've discussed with some of you. Our paid on calls and our career are going to be able to do a lot, let's say, with this training facility and really master our trade. I do remind you also that in 2018 we have 4.5 that is already budgeted in the CIP. And so by reducing the size of the fire station to something that we definitely need, still fits our needs, we're able to do more by adding on this training element that is more of a multi-purpose and will be able to be used. The third element there is the staffing, where we add 3 firefighters for $267,000. And again, 52% of that is covered by the ambulance fund. And so the rest of it is the general. The $128,000 is what the general fund would incur by that. Now, with the staffing, because I know that is a concern of many, we have also projected how it's going to impact our overtime. We also know we're going to have increased call volume. There's other variables that I believe will bring that general fund obligation down some, because we're going to see an uptake in other areas. We don't know that number, though, exactly. We just know there's a positive benefit to that. Okay.
I'm just curious as to whether Chief Pullman has any comments on the training building.
I guess the only thing, President Hall and Councilmember Rader, is I'm quite familiar. My previous department had a very similar relationship with the fire department, and the building looks almost identical. It allows for, if you notice, the one side had a 2-story and the other side was a 4-story. And one thing that we enjoyed in that is when you're conducting building searches, when you get to that 3rd floor of the 4-story area, at the end of the hallway or at the end of the building, there's like a little attic entry over the 2nd story of that 2-story building. And that is very similar to like what you might see in a 2-story house with an entrance over a garage attic at the end of the hallway, things like that. Also, when you're in the 2-story side, in the ceiling, there was a ceiling access into the attic area, which also allowed for practice searching like a ranch-style home that might have a attic entrance over the hallway. So that building allows for a lot of different dynamic entries and different search techniques, and also for clearing opportunities and practicing that with our officers. So it's a very efficient building that would be able to accommodate both departments.
Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, Chief, with the training center, do you envision ever allowing any of your mutual aid departments access to that, or would you treat that as a revenue source, or any of those kind of thoughts?
It's a great question. 2 parts to that. First, yes, it would be open to outside agencies. You know, we already discussed kind of the maintenance costs, and there's very little maintenance cost. And we're burning pallets. And so we could even ask the department to bring their own burn material, so there's really no cost to us. And so yes, they would benefit from it, and we want them to learn and all that. So yes, it would be open. The second part to that, the revenue, no, I don't believe we should ask them. We're surrounded by the volunteer departments that this training is well, just like us. We're needing the training just as much as they are, but they may not be able to afford it. We would ask to cover our costs, which are the burn material and things like that.
Yeah, I just asked because you mentioned you go down to Rochester, it costs you $8,000. I mean, is that pure, is that cost, or is that just revenue source for them?
Probably both. Their facility is much different.
Okay.
Their facility is a all concrete and block structure that can do a lot more than this one. Again, I looked at the needs, and this building is nothing more than what we need. It's exactly what we need. The Rochester facility would be great, and if we did have that, yes, we would be charging more and things like that, but that's not what Red Wing needs.
But I'm presuming that this would go out to the surrounding departments, and those are also the same departments that we have mutual aid agreements with back and forth. So when they call us for help or we call them for help, we'd kind of like to have them show up and be trained already.
Yes. And that's one thing I have done is we've opened up all our training to our mutual aid departments, and this would be just like that. Yes.
Okay.
Another
Yeah,
question.
oh.
Probably for Marshall a bit. They kept mentioning that 52% of the staffing cost goes to the ambulance fund. How much does that change with additional 3 staff? And then my other question really relates to, is that percentage that we're always talking about, is that based on ambulance billing, or is it taking into account the write-offs that we do with the ambulance fund? And how does that all play together?
A lot of good questions. I'll try to answer them. The 52% really, it came from a study that predates my employment here. I started back in 2000. And there was a study done prior to that by a gentleman out of the St. Paul Fire, their accountant. And he came down and evaluated, he did a time study, in fact, is what he did. And his determination was that 52% of the time spent is on ambulance-related matters, and the other 48 fire. That's where the split comes from. Does it need revision? Probably. The basis for the 52% is that study. How do write-offs affect? Does the percentage change moving forward? Start with that question. No, it doesn't. It still remains at 52% ambulance, 48% general fund. How do the write-offs? I think was another question. The ambulance is its own enterprise fund. So it collects the revenue, it pays all the costs of providing the services. So your question regarding write-offs, when we budget, we're looking at the revenues, expenditures, but we also recognize that there's an underlying cash flow. And the fund cash flows in such a manner that we see no need at this particular point in time to change that allocation because we're adding potentially these 3 different amenities or services that the chief has been explaining.
Would there not be the potential for an increase with adding 2 more people, that you'd be able to take more mutual aid calls, more Lake City ambulance trips to Rochester, that might tip the scale a little further?
Oh, yes. But that's I can't look back at our data because we weren't.
I know you can't give
Yes,
a number.
but you're right, yes. Yes. If I could answer a little bit more. I could think of in my 3 months of being here, of easily half dozen times that we've turned down those calls. Now, I'm not saying each single one of those we could have taken, but I know some of them we could have.
Kim?
We have the land there, unfortunately, and it overlaps a large portion of our existing area that we cover with our downtown station. Wouldn't this station, because we're still leaving a large portion of the west end of our town unprotected or not taking advantage of the 30% insurance savings or some of the other things that the west side station would provide. If the station had been moved further west, it could meet those needs.
I think you said it there at the beginning. We own the land. It's been purchased, and I can go back to that slide if you want, but you're right. This study that was done in 2009 identified this spot as being the best location for the fire station. And they looked at call volume, they looked at where the majority of the calls are, they looked at response times to those types of calls, and that's how they identified this spot. I'm not aware that they identified any other locations other than this one.
I'll just reiterate.
Well, there were some that were looked at, but
Oh, yes.
out of those, and like across off of Highway 19, there was a spot that was looked at over there too. But this was the spot that was chosen because it met all of the criteria that they were looking for at the time when the study was done.
if I could just add, support what you both said, that this site was actually carefully evaluated when that study was undertaken to optimize its location based on call volumes, types of calls, and things of that nature. I'll add one more, that there was a third station proposed too, and that one was down on the island. So.
My concern is that that study was from 2009. The demographics of the west end of town have changed dramatically in the last few years with increased activities down there. And I question whether the call study from then is even relevant today.
I would say that's very close. In looking at, I was able to pull out data. We haven't been collecting data in a way that it's easy to identify that. But in the snapshots that I've been taking through our and also the staff has helped with, it is still the same. Yes, as construction, as that community develops, things do change. I think the only area that we're not able to cover within that 5 miles is the island. And if we were to go that far, then now we're leaving back in that Burnside area, we're leaving that area open. Now, I have not overlaid maps on that, but...
Did that answer your question?
It answered my question.
But I will say, even though that the island is beyond the 5 miles, it takes 10 minutes to get from here, from our main station, to that location. And so even though it's outside the 5 miles, we're still reducing our response time to these emergency calls by 10 minutes plus. And so, it represents over 1,000 calls last year, and that's just going to continue to increase. That could have been serviced in a different way.
Shannon, I called 2 other training centers, and you said their maintenance is between $12,000 and $36,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? So,
yes, that is correct. There are other facilities, and I'm sure I know exactly, because I have built, actually the one that I showed here is one that we constructed. There are other types of facilities that use a spray in foam that is a thermal protector. Those are the concrete facilities, the cinder block facilities, that requires a lot of uptake. Now, why people use those is because they're able to burn in excess of 800 degrees. And our facility will only go to 800 degrees. They're able to go well beyond that. They're actually able to reach the 1,200 degree threshold for flashovers in those facilities. And so they're able to do more. And that's why they use it, but in the flip side, there's more uptake in it, or more maintenance, let's say.
all right. Then how many training centers are within a 60-mile radius of here?
Well, Captain, do you know exactly? We have 2? Okay, we have 2. Where would they be at? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear where they were at. That's what I thought. Okay, I knew one of them was going to be Rochester. Just didn't want to know what the other one was. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dan?
Have any of these positions been budgeted for 2017?
No, not yet.
Okay.
They haven't been budgeted for 17 because we were expecting a 18 build, and we're gonna, this is a process, not just a one-time event. So as we get construction calendars down, and as we determine when assets will become available, I think we'll go back and evaluate when staffing needs to be onboarded to accommodate that. But right now, we're still what I call in the planning phase. We haven't moved to construction documents as far as I'm aware, so we've got a little work to do on the timing.
The staff, of course, I would like to get them on board as soon as possible, because we talked about the impact that it would have to our staffing today. We're able, operationally, we're able to take them on. It would be that $128,000 from the general fund that hasn't been budgeted.
Did I get your question?
Yep.
Megan?
the 3 additional, would you be able to do that in stages, or do you feel like the only way to make it effective and efficient is to bring 3 on at once? So in other words, if we could budget for 1 more in 2017, would that be helpful?
It's a good question, but no, I don't believe we can, no. We're going to need to bring all 3 on so they go through the training. 1 is going to each shift. We have 3 shifts, and there'll be 1 going to each shift. We need to do that for our operations all at the same time. We couldn't hold 1 shift to a different staffing level than the first shift.
Rob?
Yeah, while the general fund cost is $128K per year, if you're looking mid-year, we're talking about $64,000 additional budget for next year.
Great.
There's probably room for that.
I know this is a topic that's been on well before I was here, and for quite a while. I'm hoping that I've brought the information that you needed to make your decisions, and so that we could move forward with that.
Did anyone else have questions? Ralph?
Was your 5 vehicles guy here?
Yes.
What is the time frame for construction? Is this, since with a 1-story now, is this much shorter time frame?
And could you come up front? Could you come up front, please, sir? Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mike Clark with 5 Bugles. To answer your question, no, it doesn't get constructed that much faster. We still have to get the concrete poured, and it's got to cure, and each step still's got to take its time frame. So we were figuring 10 months or so. For the last one, it's still about 10 months. It's about as fast as you can get a building done these days.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.